So good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today for our conversation around community banks, small businesses, and how their relationship powers our economy. I'm Robert Bobroff. I'm the publisher of the St. Louis Business Journal and the moderator for today's discussion. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's event, the Bank of Franklin County. Thank you so much for your support. We believe that we've assembled a fantastic group of panelists, socially distanced, of course, to bring you a great conversation. So let's begin by getting to know those panelists just a little bit better. I'll start to my left with Bill. Could each of you give your name, company, a little bit about your company and how you got into the business you're in?
All right, good morning. My name's Bill LaBeaume. I'm with Stefanina's Pizzaria and Steph's Pizza up in the St. Charles County area. We're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary next April. My mother-in-law, Stefanina, started the business with her son. I've been in the business for 25 years. We got great food, great employees, and we're very fortunate.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Karvel Kofoed. I am with Universal Medical Resources here in Washington, Missouri. We are nuclear imaging specialists. We buy sell nuclear imaging cameras. We service them. We provide parts. We do repairs. We have about 50 employees. Great privately owned company here in Washington, Missouri.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Bob?
Bob Dobsch, President and CEO of Bank of Franklin County, and we chartered in 2000 as a new bank, and we're celebrating our 20th year this year. We have 5 locations and about $300 million in total assets, and again, I'm going to tell you we're very blessed. We have wonderful employees and wonderful communities that we serve.
Thanks, Bob. Becky?
I'm Becky Bohr. I am the Senior Vice President of Finance and Retail Operations at Bank of Franklin County. My banking career started about 8 months after the bank was opened, so back in 2001. I'm also very fortunate. I serve on the faculty of the Graduate School of Banking at Colorado, which is America's premier community banking school. So community banking is really in my blood at this point in time. It's something I'm very passionate about.
Bill?
My name is Bill Dickinson. I'm the president of Osage Food Products and OFP Ingredients. Osage Food Products is based here in Washington, Missouri. We're 21 years old this year. We're an ingredient trading company, so we supply bulk, primarily protein ingredients and flavors to the protein and nutritional industry. OFP Ingredients is based in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, and that facility we further process dairy powders for functional applications.
Well, thanks panelists. I wanted to start with maybe Bob and Becky. Maybe you could give our audience an idea of how these panelists were selected as kind of a representative of a Bank of Franklin County customer and also businesses on Main Street, USA.
Sure. Bob, before I do that, I'd like to thank you and the St. Louis Business Journal for sponsoring the event and giving us this platform to talk about our businesses as well as small business and community banking as a whole. When we looked at who we wanted to invite this morning, we primarily tried to cover 3 basic industries, and that's retail, wholesale, as well as manufacturing, and I think you're getting a pretty good representation of all of those folks here. The other piece that we looked at is we wanted panelists that had a strong and deep relationship with Bank of Franklin County, somebody that could speak to the fact that throughout the time period of the ups and downs in the economy the last 20 years or so that we've been their farm and been a part of their business. The other piece again is we also looked for the size of the companies. When you talk about small business, it's a broad range of dollars in sales and a lot of different ways to describe small business. So what we try to do is reach the kind of the middle ground, if you will, in terms of sales, number of employees that I think represented most of the small businesses in the area and certainly our customer base for the bank. Beck, did you want to add anything?
We also wanted to make sure that we got customers who took PPP loans at the time, since that's going to be a big topic of conversation today.
It will. We'll stick with you, Bob and Becky. Also, could you give your sense of what a community bank provides and how your bank has changed, how your bank is different now than it was, say, 20 years ago?
The interesting thing about banking is that the basic functions of banking haven't really changed. You know, we basically deal with negotiable instruments, whether it be a check or loan documents. But at the end of the day, those documents are pretty much consistent throughout history. What has changed is how we deliver those products and services to customers. And that's primarily driven by technology. So if you just think back to when we were children or our parents, you know, the long lines in banking to cash checks on Friday nights and the first of the month for Social Security checks, you know, those kind of things. Today we don't have those long lines. You know, most people are paid through direct deposit. Most businesses are utilizing ACH, where they're able to do internet transactions within their office to deposit their checks. And then if you just think about, you know, I'm going to say the kids today, if you will, if they receive a check, if they actually know what to do with the check, they can literally deposit by taking a picture of it. So again, the basic functions of banking have pretty much stayed the same, but it's the technology piece that has driven so much of the changes in banking.
So it's hard to talk about banking without talking about consolidation, and it's happening across the country, certainly happening here in the St. Louis region as well. Number of banks in St. Louis has declined from 92 in 2008 to 61 as of June 2020. You know, why do you think that these banks in St. Louis and nationally have merged and consolidated so rapidly, and how has that benefited you guys?
It's actually even more profound when you look at the national numbers. If you look at the last 40 years, the number of banks have declined from about 14,500 down to about 4,500 banks. So it's pretty drastic. I'm going to tell you that one of the certainly efficiencies has driven a lot of the consolidation. Technology has driven a lot of the consolidation. Quite honestly, regulation has driven a lot of the consolidation. But it also has created opportunities. And again, when I talk about Bank of Franklin County, that we've been chartered for 20 years, we're a direct result of those consolidations. So it certainly has opened up avenues for new banks to be founded and to provide services. You know, for us, I think the large banks certainly serve a market, but when you're close to your customer base, you certainly can react to their situations a little bit more quickly. And then with COVID, when you look at what's taken place with COVID, certainly a lot of the big banks have driven people towards their technology bases, closed lobbies, closed branches to drive people towards their banks. We, on the other hand, certainly have remained open and tried to deal with the COVID situation on a local basis and responded accordingly.
Awesome. So Becky, you had alluded to it earlier. Let's talk about the Ppp Loan Program. I noticed your bank was very active on social media during that time to keep the community businesses informed about changes in the loan process. You set up an email account, which is relief@bankfc.com, as an outlet for people to ask questions and get more information. It was obviously a very frustrating time for some small businesses. We saw big banks struggle to meet the needs of their customers in a timely fashion. How were you able to respond to your clients, your current clients, and then obtain new clients during that process? How were you different than the big banks, and what were you able to do to accommodate your customers' needs?
Sure. Well, back about the time that the PPP was all rolling out, we were already in a situation where we were constantly in contact with all of our customers anyway, just because it was very confusing. It was a stressful time, and COVID was impacting every aspect of life in general at that point. So it was a very easy, natural progression for us to continue that as PPP started rolling out. And really, we learned that back in 2008, back when the Great Recession was happening. It's incredibly important to reach out to your customers to be as transparent and accessible as possible. You want to be able to reassure them that everything's going to be okay and that we have their back. So for us, one of the easiest ways to do that was through our Facebook platform. You could easily reach a lot of people that way. It was a great way to get the general information out there with our content and then point them to our actual web page to get the details. And we were one of the first banks in our area to actually have a dedicated web page to PPP. The reason for that was we were not going to shy away from it. We knew we weren't going to shy away from it. There were a lot of businesses in our area that we knew probably wouldn't survive this if it weren't for that lifeline. So we created that webpage, set up the relief@bankfc.com email address, and that was essentially an inbox that was pretty much monitored 24/7, as crazy as that sounds. But we immediately then sent those emails off to our lenders to be able to get back with those folks right away if they had an inquiry. We were pretty much all hands on deck at that point in time. And just like every other community bank, I mean, we were there early in the morning, we stayed till late at night, you did what you needed to do to get these things done. And we brought in staff from all areas of the bank. So I'm not a lender, but this was not my first time dealing with a crisis because I was around in 2008. So it was just very natural for me to jump in and be able to help out and kind of lead us through all of that. And then we talked about social media and the big banks. So Facebook is really a platform for people to commiserate about their experiences, whether those experiences are good or they're bad. Part of our Facebook platform we monitor it constantly, but with that content, people were commenting that, I'm with such and such bank and I haven't gotten a reply back yet, or I can't even get a call back, or I can't even get through on the 1-800 number. So we were able to really take those opportunities, reply back to those people, and capitalize on the failures of the big banks to be able to do what we were able to do during that time. So we kind of swooped in and we saved the day. Yeah.
Robert, if I could just add too, one of the other things that I think most everybody remembers, the big banks really struggled with how they were going to deal with the PPP loan program when it first rolled out. There was a lot of distrust in terms of what the government was going to roll out at the end of the day, because again, Congress passes a law and then or a bill, and then naturally they pass it on to the Treasury and to the SBA to kind of figure out the details. Our relationship with the SBA has been very, very good, and so I think we had a tremendous amount of faith, and I will say it was a leap of faith in some respects. But very early on, we knew that this was going to get figured out. I mean, again, our experience with the SBA is that they truly do figure things out. Sometimes it takes them longer than what we would like, but they will get it done. So again, while the big banks were sitting back whether they wanted to participate in the program or not, whether they were going to worry about the forgiveness or not, we had companies that were worried about whether they were going to make payroll at the end of the day, quite honestly. And so regardless of what the program final steps were going to be to get there, this was literally a lifeline that they were throwing out to our customer base, and certainly it was in the bank's best interest to try and reach as many customers as we could to get that lifeline on there. And again, I'm going to tell you, we had faith. You can call it a leap of faith, but we knew it would get worked out.
Well, and it was clear from talking with the banking regulators, so we had the support at the state and federal level. They pretty much said, hey banks, we need you to do whatever you can possibly do to keep these businesses going. And as community banks, we had to answer the call. If we don't have those businesses in our communities are weakened. So part of that was, understanding that the spirit of all of this. You turned on the TV, you knew the government shut us down because they didn't feel like they had a choice, but they also knew that they needed to do whatever it took to get America through this. The spirit at the end of this was going to be forgiven. The only way they were going to be able to get this money out to the businesses was through the banks. That was the easiest route, and it didn't even occur to us to second guess it at that point.
And the regulators, again, Becky talked about the support of the regulators. When you're a community bank, you really do have a direct audience with the regulators. So we know them by name, and we know who we can call if we have questions. And again, I think some of the bigger banks are dealing with regulators at a different level. So in our case, we had a lot of faith in the fact that this was going to work, that everybody meant what they said, and we were going to get to the end game of the forgiveness, and we will. I mean, it's still got to get through the system, but it will get figured out.
Well, I thought this might be a good time for us to hear from all of our panelists. How was your experience with the PPP application process? Maybe touch on also how your local, state, and federal government assistance was during that process as well. So can we start with Bill?
Be honest with you, I didn't get much from the state or local government. I was getting all my information off the internet from talking to other business owners and customers that would come in, and then I'd go back on the internet and try to find out more information, go to the SBA website. I wasn't getting much at all, to be honest with you. It wasn't until I talked to Dave from the bank Dave Ranking, and he assured me they're going to get us taken care of. He said, don't worry about, we had business loans with the bank, and he says, we're going to put delays on that. He goes, don't worry, we'll take care of you. And man, it just made life so much easier, knowing that you had somebody behind you instead of trying to figure out something off the internet. We were scared. We were really scared. We had meetings with the manager, kind of like doomsday, but after talking to the bank, getting the loan application in, and understanding how things work, it really put us at ease.
It was a scary time, or still is a scary time for a lot of people and a lot of businesses. So you certainly weren't alone in that.
I don't want to lose the family business on my watch.
Not on your watch, right? Not on your watch.
So I had a similar experience. You hear everything from what's out in the news, and you start hearing that this is going to happen, and you're going to have this opportunity to do this, but you really don't know how it's going to work, and you don't get a lot of direct information from government authorities or the SBA. That didn't come directly to us. But we immediately knew we needed it because in our industry, healthcare industry, non-essential services, which most of our customers dealt in the non-essential elective type healthcare services, and we realized, hey, if they're shut down, that shuts the pipeline of cash flow down, and suddenly we're in a bind, and we have a lot of employees. We have about 50 employees. We have an intensive, pretty large payroll, and we're thinking, okay, how are we going to keep that going? And so we were very aggressive up front in wanting to find out the details of this. And of course, the first call we made was to the bank. And I do some financial consulting for several other companies as well. And so I'm getting calls from all these companies, and we're trying to figure out, the accounting firm that we deal with, has a spreadsheet where they think that this is how it's going to be calculated. And so we're all over this up front on this process. But thankfully, the bank was able to come through, and I think we had our application in the morning of the first day that you're allowed to do it, and by that afternoon we had approval, and by the next week we were funded. And that was an absolute lifesaver for our business, just because the cash flow pipeline had shut down from a customer standpoint, and we needed that in order not to have to lay off our employees, and we were able to keep them all. So for us, the loan application process was very, very smooth, and that was thanks to our local banking relationship and what they were able to do. In fact, I think there were some parts of the application that were changed after the first day, and so we were grandfathered in under the original application process that the bank helped us approve. So it was a good process, and we appreciate very much our relationship with the bank in helping get that done. Were we the first loan? Okay, well, good. That's great. I mean, it worked well for us, and it was, like I say, it was a lifesaver for us because we wanted to keep these employees going, and we knew there was no way with the size of our payroll in order to get that done.
Sure. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing it. Bill?
From our aspect, I know we put in for the application for the loan originally. My goal was to not use it. My goal is to never have to go out and do that, use help. But as you saw, more businesses shut down, and with our primary product going into fitness centers and gyms, and they shut down nationwide, you could start to see, again, our business non-essential customers at the end of that chain. So as we looked a little further into it, we decided to move forward with it. And I think, and Bob, you touched on it, a lot of confusion. I look at the Bank of Franklin County as an advisor, just like my CFO, just like my doctor. And if they say, just do it, you're better off to do it, and we'll sort it out later, I trust them enough that we're going to do it. And it certainly paid off in the end. We definitely needed it because you could see March, April, May, sales declined drastically. Eventually they do come back, but it certainly helped me keep people employed both here and in Wisconsin during that time.
I think the theme we're hearing overall is have a good relationship with the bank, right? Trust the bank, right?
It worked for us.
I think it worked for all three.
I tell you, the relationship was awesome. I mean, we got Dave's cell phone number. I mean, he would text me, keep me updated. I don't think you would get that at a big bank,
Cell phone numbers, probably not.
Probably not. Well, Karvel said that. He says, you never know who you're going to talk to at a big bank.
Yep.
When I call the guy, he's going to answer, you know, or text or email. It's awesome.
You know, that's important, especially during trying times, right? Bill, we'll stick with you. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you've faced reaching your customers with the business that you're in and managing employees, you know, during this time?
Luckily, Stefanina's is 50% of our business is carry out and delivery. So we already had the infrastructure in place to handle carry out and delivery. You know, we were pretty upset we had to close down the dining room because of the, you know, what they told us to do. We did what they told us. We started doing curbside. You know, as unfortunately our regulars that would come into the dining room every day or every week, you know, it's weird to say, maybe what you guys know is about a small community bank, but they're your friends. You got relationships with these people, and sometimes we're their entertainment, and they're our entertainment. You know, there's some funny stories from these older people, you know, but you know, we miss that, and they miss that. So with the carry out and delivery, that really helped us out a lot. Unfortunately, well, I guess that goes with the next question, but the dining room suffered, our servers suffered. Half of our staff were getting paid, half of them were not getting any hours because they were wait staff. Yeah. And that did cause some trouble.
Yeah. Restaurants got hit hard,
We did, hard. And luckily in our position, again, we were big carry out and delivery people. And some of our stores did very well with that. But the main store in O'Fallon, our sales were down because of delivery.
Well, our family, we try to support local. We ordered pizza carry out last night.
Well, it's funny because people were so generous with tips and buying gift cards, paying more than they should. But that brought us another problem because the cashiers and the curbside help and the drivers, they were getting these awesome tips, and they're coming back and bragging to the staff about how big a tip. They gave them a $20, $30 tip. Well, then you have a salad person or a line cook getting upset that they're still making their regular wages, and these folks are making big tips, you know. And, that caused us some trouble, and the loan helped us a lot. I was able to give the line folks some extra bonus money and the manager some extra bonus money because their feelings were hurt. They were jealous, and I don't blame them. They're doing all the work, and then you got somebody carrying out to a car, and so that made things more equal, and that helped out a lot. Kept morale back up, kept morale up.
Speaking of challenges, you know, one of the things that we noticed, like you, was that employees had very different reactions to how to deal with COVID. Okay, some of the employees were, you know, this is terrible, I can't be a part of it, and some of them are like, well, you know, I don't really care. And so one of the issues or one of the challenges that we dealt with was how to help our business continue to carry on, knowing that our employees had different feelings and reactions. Some of them wanted to work from home exclusively, some of them didn't care. You know, how do you protect them while they're there? So there were a lot of challenges that came along as a result of this COVID thing, employee-related, customer-related, and all.
The amount of adapting that we have to do during this time, right?
Another problem we had was this unemployment. We had people on unemployment texting them, talking to their friends saying, yeah, I'm getting all this money sitting home doing nothing, and you're going to work making 10 or 12 bucks an hour, and that caused trouble.
Yes, that was a challenge.
For us, I think the biggest challenge, and Bill, you pointed to it, is the unemployment benefits that came on the back end of this. Because as we, up in Wisconsin, as we started to come out of this in June, you couldn't hire anybody. And when you're ready and business is coming back and you cannot find anybody to be in a warehouse and a forklift on a production line because the amount of money being made, that was a very big challenge for us and probably set us back 2 months just in being able to expand production at that facility. As soon as that spigot went off, we went from 0 responses to help wanted ads to over 200. Yeah. So we were helped and then we were harmed. Well, I'll say it.
That's a common story.
Yes, yes.
We'll stick with you, Bill. We've talked about challenges. Have there been any opportunities during COVID for you all?
There have. In the food industry and my business, we have a lot of diversity in the product mix just based on my history in the business. So one of the biggest opportunities came from the food box program that the USDA put out because it was very heavy on dairy, cheese, milk powders, also on meats. So we were able to work with a variety of food banks and companies who were packing those USDA food boxes to supply products. Other opportunity that came about for us, again with the production facility, we were primarily focused on producing whey proteins, and again that came to a screeching halt, but at the same time that plant was able to produce instant fortified non-fat. So again, back to emergency food baskets, we shipped, I don't know how many truckloads we were shipping out to the East Coast, out to the West Coast, where customers were packing that off for food bank programs and for school nutrition. So we did have some opportunity, but we were fortunate because we had that flexibility. A lot of businesses weren't so fortunate.
Let's shift back to Bob and Becky. We're hearing some stories, some great stories about your clients who are extremely happy. We've also touched on some of the bigger banks not being able to come through this in a positive light. Is that basically what you're seeing? Can you talk a little bit about the customers that, other stories that you've got with customers coming to you from bigger banks, and what so those are some of the positives, and then also tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you might be facing as well.
I'm going to speak again, going back to the employment situation, and that was a common theme that we heard from any number of employers, that as we were coming out of this, that the unemployment benefits were such that it was very difficult to find employees. They were out there, but trying to get them to want to work, if you will, for a wage as opposed to unemployment that was I'm going to use the word lucrative at the end of the day. I mean, there were companies that, employees that were laid off one day and were still getting supplemental benefits at the end of the day. So, I mean, I think for a lot of businesses, that was a real challenge. The other piece about the shutdown was it was terribly unfair in terms of who was able to stay open and who were forced to close. If you sold any kind of disinfectant or any kind of food piece, you were pretty much able to stay open. If you were a clothing store, you were pretty much shut down. And then again, you get into all the sports, entertainment, lodging, all those kind of things. Certainly, the whole shutdown has been pretty unfair for certain businesses, and I think we all have family and friends that have been affected that way. As far as the PPP Loan Program, again, Karvel was talking about being the first applicant. We were ready, we were set up, and again, I go back to the big banks. They really didn't have the infrastructure to handle that, and as a result, we were able to capitalize on, quite honestly, their inefficiencies, which is a little bit different for a community bank, because most of the time we're the victim of the large banks' efficiencies, if you will. But we were certainly able to capitalize on that. And with that, we certainly have the expectation that we're going to continue to maintain those relationships that we gained through the PPP Loan Program. And I think it's interesting to note that many of these customers that we were able to gain during the PPP Loan Program were customers that we had been calling on for a long time, that we knew them. There just wasn't a need for them to make a change in their banking relationship. And then all of a sudden a crisis hits. So again, when you talk about an opportunity, when a crisis hits and the first person they called didn't answer the phone, and the second person that they called did answer the phone, you've got a real advantage. And we worked real hard on all of those to try and make sure that we followed up with those customers. And again, I think it's going to carry us into next year.
Well, and to touch on social media a little bit in this as well, social media, we kind of view it as an extension of us as bankers. So when you see a post from a big bank, you recognize the content, and you're paying attention to the content, but you don't stop and think about that's my banker. So the great part about working in a community bank is that constant interaction, that these are relationships. They're not one-off transactions to us. We're actually trying to generate a relationship. So when someone sees a post from Bank of Franklin County and they realize that they want to talk to somebody about that product or that service, they know they can call Bob, they know they can call Becky. In many situations, you're not going to find banks where you can walk in and talk to the president of the bank. He's not sitting in the lobby. Everyone has Bob's cell phone number, kind of like Dave Reinking's. They have Bob's cell phone number. You know, that's, because like you've been banking some of these people for 40 years. They might not be banking with Bank of Franklin County right now, but he's known them for that long. That's one of the great things about being in a community, is it's a relationship.
Karvel, this one's for you. Obviously, you've had a really great experience with Bank of Franklin County. Have you ever banked with the big banks? And I'm assuming you have, because this question is for you. And can you describe some of the differences there? And you know, was there a particular experience that had you switch from big banks to community?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes. I've had lots of banking experiences. I represent a number of other clients as well, and many of them are with large banks. In fact, I helped 5 different small businesses in the PPP loan process. And the thing that I find about the small banks is as we've talked about, is the relationship opportunity. You get on the phone, you call the number, and you have the cell phone number of your account manager who answers your phone, who answers your email. And that's different than calling a 1-800 customer service number who's assigned, you know, who happens to pick up the phone and they, you know, get all your information and then they log on and see what your stuff is. Just very different than calling your local banker who knows you, who you've had lunch with or dinner or gone out on a, you know, to play golf or something, and they know who you are, they know what your needs are. One of the other things I love about local banks is that you know and have access to upper management. You call an 800 number at a big bank, and you get probably a decent customer service person that can look up your information and kind of help you out, but you don't have that one-on-one direct service and access to upper management if you have special needs or particular projects or things that you want to do on. It's very limited with the larger banks. And so, you know, in the ones that I helped, especially in this PPP process, several of them were with large banks. And in one occasion, we weren't even able to talk to someone about the PPP process. We literally had to go through their online system. So if you had a question, you know, you could call your local branch, you know, where you live, and someone would answer, but they knew nothing about it. Or you could call the 800 customer service number and someone would answer and they'd try to help you, but they really didn't know. And so you end up having to go back to their online, then wait. So yes, I've had experience with big banks, with small banks, and the small bank experience and the one-on-one direct relationship type service is just really, really critical and really helpful.
You know, Bob, Becky, Karvel just kind of alluded to it, that, you know, when he's with a bigger bank, you know, you're directed to the internet, you know, and during this COVID crisis, a lot of the smaller banks, community banks like yourself, stayed open and were more accessible. Did you see that as a huge advantage? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, we certainly did, and to Karvel's point about the 1-800 number, I always refer to it as the higher court, if you will. So, you know, many times customers have issues, and there's always going to be in the business, we all have conflicts in business, and, you know, whether you're doing a transaction, whether it's a loan or a deposit transaction, many times you have some kind of complications to that transaction, and if you're with a larger bank, it's kind of like, we're going to put you on hold, or we can't do that is the answer. And in a smaller bank, the customer knows that, you know, we'll go ask Becky if you know, she knows what I'm trying to do here. And you can take the common sense approach to what the customer's trying to accomplish. And you know, most of the time as banks, we're heavily regulated and we have to give you the regulator answer. But again, once you know what the customer's trying to do, you can usually try to work a way around some of those difficulties, if you will. But again, it's being able to talk to a banker, and whether you mentioned Dave Reinking just as an example, it doesn't have to be Bob or Becky or Jane or Brenda or whoever, it's any of our account officers. In a small community bank, you have a pretty flat organizational chart. So that helps a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of hierarchy. And, again, like with any business, that can also cause complications. But at the end of the day, most people have pretty much most of our employees can give a consistent answer throughout the spectrum of questions that customers ask. And I think that is in itself a huge advantage.
Let me tell you about cell phones and Bob. He's a terrible golf partner. He is on his phone every day. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Now, when he puts
Well,
the
I'm also
phone,
a terrible golfer, but
I was going to say, when he puts the phone down, how is he?
no,
in
I'm
action?
still terrible. I'm on the phone because it's easier.
It's your excuse,
Bob's
right?
always taking phone calls. He's very accessible.
Good. I'm glad to hear. Thank you. Becky, this one's for you. There's obviously been a movement to digital bank and digital banking in general. Do you feel that you can effectively be both a digital bank and a traditional community bank?
Absolutely, absolutely. So in the last 20 years, the Bank of Franklin County has been open. I can say that I've seen it from the beginning where there was no such thing. We didn't really have debit cards at first or anything. I think we might have ATM cards back then. The biggest leap, the biggest hurdle that we had for any customers was that initial leap into online banking. And that was only because it was really brand new around here. But once people got used to that, the transition into mobile banking and everything else was very simple. And we've talked about this before. We offer all the same products and services that big banks do. It's just the way that we interact with the customers on the other side of things. So we still have to be able to have that high level of customer service. They still need to be able to call us on our cell phones, contact us, expect that level that they've grown accustomed to. So this is something that community banks, they can do this and they do it very well. I really don't see any obstacles at all with moving into that digital world. The only thing I guess that could be is we have regulations that says we need to know our customers. So when you start opening accounts online, you don't have somebody sitting in front of you. It's a little harder to know your customer the way that you're supposed to, but that goes back to the relationship thing. So, big banks don't always have that opportunity to get to know them the way that we do, and that's part of why we can turn loan decisions and everything around so quickly and make those one-off decisions quickly, is because chances are we probably already know them.
Yeah, I think we've heard today you guys don't have an issue getting to know your client.
Going back to the regulation of know your customer, and that literally is a regulation. When you think about how that regulation evolved, it really came as a result of, number one, technology, and number two, larger banks trying to manage the efficiencies. Small community banks know all of their customers intimately, quite honestly, and we do have everybody's cell number. We know their families and we know their children, and sometimes it's just part of who we are, if you will. But when you start talking about know your customers, it's very difficult for a large bank to understand the customer and the individual transactions. It's very easy for us to do that. And as Beck said, the challenge for us is going to be as all the community banks start opening up accounts online, as to how we transition that closeness to our customers that we've been able to enjoy this whole time. But again, it's very easy when you start talking about know your customer regulation. It's very easy to comply in a small community bank because we do know our customers.
Which is something interesting that when you started, you didn't have debit cards. I cannot remember life without a debit card.
Again, 20 years ago, we had ATM cards, but that was the extent of what we had. And again, debit cards evolved after we opened up. That's been a difficulty for a small bank too, is because we've had to absorb all those expenses immediately. Where again, if you're an older banker, you've been around a while, you can absorb you can spread those expenses out. We absorbed all those expenses on the front end. That's been difficult for us, but it's been well worth it.
Yeah, and on the commercial side, trying to cater to those customers, especially as we've moved into the St. Charles market, those folks have come to expect those same types of services that the bigger banks offer. So we've had to move into cash management. We have remote capture, all those other kinds of things that are those conveniences, because when you only have one location in St. Charles County, you have to make it as easy as you possibly can for people to bank with you. So I think we've done a good job of rolling all of that out.
If I could just, on one of your comments, Bob, several years ago, one of the large nationals approached us about taking over our portfolio, and I remember the gentleman came in and he said, well, we have regional decision makers. I said, okay, let's talk about that. So we went through the whole process. It was 3 months before they came back and said, well, yes, we're prepared to take your business. I said, you know, with Bank of Franklin County, that was about a 5-day decision. When you're banking local, and like I said, we know each other in the community, we have trust in one another, the big banks just don't turn like that. And that's the last time I've talked to one of the big nationals, because again, I know where to find Bob, I know where to find Becky, I know where to find everybody else. And when we have a problem, I can get answers, and I can get them within minutes.
And when you have an
makes a
opportunity.
business run. Yes.
Yeah, we've been able to, Bill specifically, only because I work with him, he's had some pretty good opportunities business-wise that needed a very quick decision from us, and we were able to turn it around within a day, I think, on one of them. Yep.
Well, Becky, we'll stick with you. How do you look at things that you implemented once as short-term solutions to create convenience offerings for your customers during COVID and develop them into like a long-term plan to keep those customers around?
So when everything with COVID first started happening, just like Bill, we had to close our lobbies. We really didn't have a choice at that point in time. And so what we needed to do was implement curbside banking, which a lot of community banks did. You just do what you have to do to adapt. We expanded the offerings through our drive up. But community banks, or not just community banks, banks in general are a little different because we are required to provide certain products and services to our customers. So when someone needs to get in their safe deposit box, we have to be able to let them in that safe deposit box. So we did have appointments to where anybody could get into the bank whenever they needed to. Along with that, though, we were able to roll out part of our fleet of interactive teller machines. So what these machines can do is basically anything that you can do with a human teller, any type of transaction you can do through these machines. And that was really key up front when the pandemic first hit, because people weren't sure how this virus spread. People were very reluctant to interact with other humans for a while. So this allowed them to still conduct their banking business without that interaction. That was really important at that time. So some of our customers have really grown accustomed to the curbside banking. They like that they can go through the drive up and get something notarized. They like that they can open up accounts that way. We're moving into all our electronic signatures and things along those lines. So all of these adaptations that we made to get through COVID, they're here to stay, because this isn't going around anytime soon. We still want our customers to feel very safe. We want our employees to feel very safe, and who knows when this is going to end. So we're just going to keep going.
Well, none of us have a crystal ball.
Right? I wish we did.
And what Becky said is, you never go back to where you were. You're constantly moving forward. So regardless of what we've implemented, whether it's us or our customers have implemented, we're all going to continue along those same lines. When Becky was talking about how you adapt and move forward, I have to tell you, I laugh, but it actually happened. I say we were closing loans on picnic tables, but there's a picnic table behind the bank, and quite honestly, there were a time period where customers really weren't comfortable coming in, and there still are customers that aren't. But again, if you can do it outside, it was a beautiful day, and they were perfectly happy, and it worked out great. I would have never guessed that a year ago, quite honestly. Not that I haven't done things like that before, but as a matter of practice, I would have never guessed that that's how we were going to be conducting business. But it works, and people appreciate that. When we did open up the lobbies after we were forced to shut down, what was amazing to me was the number of customers that were so relieved that we opened up that they could actually come back in and talk to somebody. Because again, even though we operated with appointments only, when you close that door and lock it, that's pretty much a signal to your customers that, stay away. Well, when we opened up the doors and were able to publicize that, again, it was amazing to me how many folks came in and appreciated the fact that they were actually able to talk to somebody one-on-one.
And we actually saw an uptick in new account openings.
Yes.
As a
Oh,
result
yes.
of that.
We
were
saw an
very
uptick in new
grateful
account openings.
that they could go in and talk to somebody. Yeah.
So during the registration process, for this event, we asked attendees to submit questions if they had any questions for our panel. So we did have a couple that were submitted. I think these are more directed to Bob and Becky. The first question is, with the SBA continuing to make changes to the forgiveness model, it seems difficult to know when the right time to request forgiveness of your loan is. Is there any insight that you all can provide?
You want to go first, Beck?
I can.
Okay.
Yes. It's confusing. The whole entire process has been confusing. That's not going to change, I don't think. What we are hearing and what we've been hearing and continuing to hear is that there is pending legislation in Congress right now that will incorporate automatic forgiveness for loans under $150,000, which is the vast majority of our loans, at least at the bank. So if that happens, that should make this whole process very, very smooth on the backside as well. When that's going to happen, we don't know. There are some businesses who really just want this debt gone, want it off their books, and if that's the situation, they can go ahead and apply for forgiveness right now. Depending on if you meet certain criteria, there's an easy form, kind of like an easy tax form. It actually is easy. You wouldn't think that, but it is. And then there's a little bit lengthier of a form that you have to fill out in some situations, but they don't ask for any huge amount of documentation. It's just making sure that you did with the money what you said you were going to do with the money. So if it's a matter of preference, go ahead and apply for forgiveness now. If not, I would wait.
I think the process is going to get easier for most customers, most recipients of the PPP, and again, I'm speaking to our bank. Roughly 85% of our customers were less than $150,000. So we are talking about truly small businesses here. Again, for most customers, I think once they get it standardized, if you will, I think it's going to be much easier for customers. And the rates on the loan are 1%, as we all know. So it's not like it's costing anybody, and the interest is also forgivable. So there's not a huge reason to push this forward other than just to get it done. From an accounting standpoint, that's a completely different story. Because I'm not an accountant, Karvel, but folks that have passed a year end in mid-year, or if this goes into December and we get past another year, there is some question as to the forgiveness piece of it.
Nice not to have that.
I would agree. I would agree with, and the problem is we already have it with a good number of businesses now because their year end was June or September or whatever year it was. So we're already faced with those questions, but.
Yeah,
I'll leave that to the.
And the SBA, they were so good at the beginning in helping get the process going. If Congress can get acted upon this stuff, then hopefully the SBA will come through and be able to help us implement a similar process quickly, correct, efficiently for those of us that are seeking forgiveness on those.
And what we're hearing right now is, I think banks have 60 days once we receive the application to process it, and then the SBA has 90 days after that. So you're talking a long way down the road.
It's still a 5 or 6 month process before it actually gets done. And again, that's part of the reason for this. If they go to the simplified form, it'll be my. Or the automatic forgiveness. Yeah, my interpretation of that is that it's going to be pretty instantaneous. So, you can start the process, or you could wait just another month or so, and hopefully there'll be some kind of a resolution. They've got to get some kind of resolution as to how they're going to deal with it.
Okay. So. Next question. Comments, Bill?
So hopeful that Congress is going to get to a resolution.
We could have a whole another hour-long discussion about that, right? That's a long. We don't have that much time.
He read my mind.
Right. So the next question is, I would love to learn about lending to community development corporations who are helping people get into homes in St. Louis. My pastor is creating that path, and a mortgage lender would be of great help. Also, is there down payment or closing cost assistance?
I'm going to tell you there's all kinds of things that are available. Most banks are members of Federal Home Loan Bank. We are out of Des Moines, and they have all kinds of specialty programs that allow for our banks to apply for down payment assistance program. I'm not sure where these folks bank at, but I would make the first phone call to a smaller community bank that probably has some access to the Federal Home Loan Bank and some of the programs that they are able to provide for low to moderate income housing, quite honestly. The other piece that I would also say is there's also a niche in larger banks through grant programs or whatever they might have through their foundations that would also assist in down payment assistance. So, quite honestly, I would get on the phone. I'd probably start with a small community bank and ask them if they're familiar with the Federal Home Loan Bank and the programs that they offer. And then I would also look for one of the larger banks or somebody that has a foundation that would have some money available for down payment assistance. Beck, you got?
The only other thing would be Community Reinvestment Act, and finding a bank that we have to make loans where we take deposits from. So you have to make sure that you are, if you're going to be lending to this, you have to have a presence in that market. So wherever that CDC is, whatever area it's going to serve, you really need to find a bank in that area who has a presence there to be able to help them.
Well, that's all the time we have. I want to thank our panelists for a great discussion. I think it's been a great reminder that community banks are important, right? That local businesses are important. We should support local. We should all buy local. I think we can all agree on that. Wanted to once again thank the Bank of Franklin County for supporting the program today. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.